Hi, Maureen here from the VPP. Today, let's talk about sexual violence and rape culture. This is a disclaimer that some of the content we cover today could be triggering for some of you. It could provoke strong reactions, emotions, and realizations to your current way of thinking. If you are being triggered, it's okay. There's help available. At the end of this presentation, I will provide you with a list of community resources that can help support you further. If you're feeling triggered, please step away from the computer, take some time, protect your mental health, and reach out to someone who can help. Lady Gaga, Viola Davis, Amy Schumer, Tiffany Haddish, Terry Crews, and Kesha. What do all of these celebrities have in common? Over the past few years, all of these celebrities have come forward to disclose that they are survivors of sexual assault. Unfortunately, these are just a few of the people in our society who have experienced sexual violence. Let's talk for a second about what sexual violence is. Sexual violence is any behavior or action that is sexual in nature and is unwanted, coerced, or committed without a person's consent. Under this umbrella fall terms we hear often, like sexual assault, sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and sexual exploitation. It's a range of behaviors that include but are not limited to sexist jokes and advertising, online harassment, trafficking, stalking, and rape. There are a lot of terms surrounding sexual violence and it can get a bit confusing, so let's clear things up. Sexual assault is any unwanted physical sexual act that is committed without a person's consent. This includes pressuring a person into providing consent to engage in a sexual act. Some examples of sexual assault could be unwanted sexual touch, such as hugging, kissing, or groping, or forced vaginal, oral, or anal penetration of any kind, otherwise known as rape. Sexual assault can be a single incident or multiple incidents by the same or different perpetrators. Experiencing unwanted sexual comments, jokes, or threats directed at you, or having an intimate photo of yourself shared without your permission are examples of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment can also include spreading rumors about someone's sex life or sexuality, catcalling, or excessive online or text messages of a sexual nature. But why would someone sexually assault another person? There are a lot of myths that surround this, and many involve blaming the victim. But the real reason that someone sexually assaults another person is in order to gain power and control over them. This is driven by the idea that the feelings, needs, and beliefs of one person or group are more important than those of another person or group. Someone who commits sexual assault perceives their victim as unequal to them. This creates a rationale for control, intimidation, humiliation, and abuse. If sexual assault were driven by arousal or anger, the alarming rates of sexual assault that exist would look quite different. Although both genders experience sexual assault, women are subjected to it at 10 times the rate of men. This is why I say that if sexual assault were about anything other than power and control, we would see men and women being affected almost equally. This is also why we refer to things like sexual assault and sexual violence as gendered issues, because those identifying as women are impacted at much higher rates than those who identify as men. There are also certain groups of women who are more vulnerable. These include racialized and indigenous women, women with disabilities, women from low-income backgrounds, women with addiction challenges, and transgendered people. Being a young woman is also a risk factor. Women between the ages of 15 and 24 report being sexually assaulted at twice the rate of any other age group of women. But why would this be? Well, there are a few reasons. Young women tend to be more social than older groups of women. The more people you expose yourself to, the more vulnerable you are to experiencing sexual assault. Young women tend to hang out more with young men. Young men are often the perpetrators of sexual violence and sexual assault. Recreational drug use and binge drinking are also associated with an increased risk of sexual assault. Both young men and young women are more likely to be engaged in these behaviors. As I've mentioned before, the reasoning behind sexual assault is rife with myths and often involves blaming the victim for their experiences. Many people hold false beliefs that what a woman wears, where she goes, whether or not she's consumed drugs or alcohol, and even her sexual past signal an invitation for sexual assault. It is always the perpetrators who need to be held accountable for their actions. It is not up to women to keep themselves safe from sexual assault. It is up to perpetrators to not commit sexual assault. To emphasize this point, let's take a look at all the ways in which women are taught to keep themselves safe. That's a long list. Men aren't often given the same warnings, nor are they discouraged from committing sexual assault often enough. Women are taught that they need to keep themselves safe from sexual assault. Does that seem right to you? We've all heard the term stranger danger, but one of the biggest myths surrounding sexual assault is that sexual assaults are perpetrated by strangers in dangerous places in our communities, when in reality, in over 52% of incidents, they were perpetrated by someone the victim knew well, like a friend, family member, neighbor, or acquaintance. And they happen either in or near the victim's home or in the home of someone familiar to them. All incidents of sexual violence need to be taken seriously. As we've learned, sexual violence falls along a continuum. Each experience is unique, and every survivor processes things differently. In fact, only 5% of survivors ever report their sexual assault to police. A study by Justice Canada cites the following reasons why: fear that they won't be believed, feeling ashamed or embarrassed, not knowing that they could report, or having no support in doing so. Let's remember also that many of these crimes are being perpetrated by someone known to the victim. That can cause a real dilemma when contemplating reporting. All sexual violence incidents can have a long-lasting impact on someone's psychological well-being. Many survivors of sexual violence report higher rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm and suicidality, sleep and eating disorders, and issues with substance use. In 2016, a documentary entitled Audrey and Daisy was released. It followed the story of Daisy Coleman, who was raped at a party at just 14 years old by a 19-year-old male who was known to her. The incident was recorded by another boy, and she was left outside wearing only a t-shirt in frigid temperatures for hours. Her assailant in the end was made to only complete 2 years of probation and to pay Daisy $1,800 in restitution. Unfortunately, 8 years following her assault, on August 4th of 2020, Daisy Coleman committed suicide at 23 years of age. Daisy's mother posted to Facebook to announce the passing of her daughter. "I wish I could have taken the pain from her. She never recovered from what those boys did to her, and it's just not fair. My baby girl is gone." During her short life, Daisy founded Safe Bay, which is an organization in the U.S. that educates teens on the effects of sexual violence. Following Daisy's death, the organization released a statement in honor of Daisy stating, "Daisy has fought for many years to both heal from her assault and prevent future sexual violence amongst teens." As advocates, we know survivors of sexual assault are 10 times more likely to attempt suicide than those who haven't experienced sexual assault. And that is why we will keep dedicating ourselves to this work in her legacy. As you can see, sexual violence is far-reaching. It has immediate impacts, and its effects can last a lifetime. It's important to acknowledge that there are numerous resources available to help someone who is struggling with the effects of sexual violence, some of which I'll provide to you at the end of this video. It's also important to acknowledge that while suicide is something that survivors are at risk of experiencing, there are many people who have worked to overcome their trauma and are thriving. You may now be asking yourself, what can we do to help eliminate sexual violence in our community? The answer is that we need to end rape culture. Rape culture is a complex set of beliefs that encourages sexual aggression and supports violence against women. It is a society in which we make violence look sexy, and it is prevalent in every aspect of our society. It includes jokes, TV, music, legal jargon, laws, words, and images that make violence against women and sexual coercion seem so commonplace that rape just seems inevitable. In a rape culture, people don't view rape as a problem that needs to be solved. They view it sort of as an inevitability. Rape culture involves blaming the victim and not holding the perpetrator accountable to their actions, and it is always rooted in patriarchal beliefs, power, and control. If I asked you to name the most popular date rape drug, you might answer something like Rohypnol or roofies. But what if I told you it was something much more common than this, something legal and readily available? The answer is actually alcohol. We've been warned to put our thumbs over the tops of beer bottles, to use a coaster to cover our drinks, never leave your drink unattended, and never accept a drink from someone if you haven't watched them make it. But what about the drink itself? Why would alcohol be the most popular drug used to facilitate sexual assault? Well, it's easily accessible, it's socially acceptable, and it's ubiquitous in our culture. Let's take a look at these alcohol advertisements. What do they tell us about alcohol and sex? They send the message that women can be dominated with alcohol, that men can make women do what they want when alcohol is involved, and that alcohol removes the need for consent. You might be thinking, they're just advertisements. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? But that's exactly the problem with rape culture. We see things like this and we just don't see it as a problem. It's so normalized that we don't see anything wrong with it. But those attitudes and beliefs translate into real life. As another example, let's take a look at these fashion advertisements. It can be difficult in most of them to tell what they're even selling, but the message of objectification and dominance over women is pretty obvious. And what about the lyrics in hit songs like these? What message is the artist sending to their listeners? Sociologists and psychologists have determined that the music that we listen to shapes our feelings, beliefs, attitudes, and values when it comes to certain subjects. Unfortunately, the music industry has a huge history of promoting violence and sexual objectification of women. The fact that these men can write songs openly about drugging or plying women with alcohol in order to have sex with them, and then these songs reach #1 on the charts, tells you all you need to know about rape culture. As you can imagine, the marketing and music industries aren't the only places where a culture of rape and sexual violence are normalized and excused. We can see rape culture in almost every aspect of our society. It becomes more prevalent when we see headlines such as these that minimize the experiences of survivors and depict perpetrators as not being in control of their actions. Or when we see celebrities like Tekashi 69 or Headley's frontman Jacob Hogarth having fans who continuously support them, despite accusations, evidence, and even criminal convictions of sexual assault. Rape culture can be seen in TV and movies that romanticize behaviors such as stalking behaviors, sexual harassment, and voyeurism, like the Netflix series You. And it's rampant in daily jokes that attempt to make light of the experiences of survivors of sexual violence. When it comes to sexual violence specifically, one of the most important things that needs to happen is that you need to take it upon yourself to practice consent and to respect the choices of others in your relationships. In order to do so, we need to understand what it means to provide consent. So what is consent? It's a voluntary agreement to participate in sexual activity. It needs to be informed and specific. People need to know exactly what it is they're getting into. It also needs to be enthusiastically agreed upon both verbally and with physical body language. So if someone has said yes, but you can tell that they're really not into it or they're feeling uncomfortable, true consent has not been gained. It also needs to be established at all points of contact, all the way from first kiss or touch, all the way through to sexual intercourse. The easiest way to remember all of the elements of consent is with the acronym FRIES. Before we engage in any type of sexual activity, we need to make sure that the consent being given is freely given, free of coercion. It's reversible or able to be withdrawn at any point in time. It's informed, the person knows what they're agreeing to. It has been given enthusiastically, both physically and verbally, and it's specific. So they know what specific activity it is that they are providing consent for. So how can you take a stand against rape culture and sexual violence? The first step is to normalize conversations around consent. Some people falsely believe that it will ruin the mood, but when you're both feeling safe and at ease, it actually ends up being much more pleasurable for both of you. The second step is to name it. Call it out, draw attention to it. In the moment when it's happening, if you see something that is promoting violence or objectification, call it out. Next is to be an active bystander. If you witness an incident of sexual violence, you must intervene. This can be done either by a distraction to diffuse the situation or by clearly communicating to the perpetrator that their actions will not be tolerated. And change your dialogue. We've all been guilty of blaming the victim at one point or another, but we need to be very mindful that our language and actions are supporting survivors of sexual violence. And lastly, believe survivors. There's a myth out there that people will fake being raped in order to get attention or fame. But the actual number of false allegations of rape are only between 2 and 8% in Canada, which is in line with other false allegation reports for other crimes in Canada. As promised, here is a list of community resources that can help support you further. Thank you so much for watching today. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at WCS_VPP and visit us at berryshelter.com. Follow our QR code to the Ontario Trillium Foundation survey. Feedback from this survey helps ensure our funding, as well as helps us to continuously improve these presentations for future audiences.